Let's just talk you through the newspaper front pages first of all, before I bring in my paper reviewer. The Sunday Telegraph, migrant flights to Rwanda by summer, they report. That's on the back, of course, of Suella Braverman's trip to Kigali. The Sunday Times, John Lewis eyes up biggest shake-up in 150 years. This is about it perhaps ditching its shareholder model and looking for an inward investment because it's fallen on hard times. The Observer, Johnson makes last-ditch bid to discredit probe into Partygate. We'll be discussing that story in just a moment. The Sunday Mirror, Britain should be proud of Lineker, says one of the Ukrainians that he has accommodated in his house in London. The Sunday Express, first Rwanda asylum flights this summer, again on Braverman's trip to Kigali. The Mail on Sunday, Suella, I'll send boat migrants to Rwanda by summer, again sticking to that timetable, doubling down on that policy. And The Sun on Sunday says BGT in crossbow stunt fury. The least perhaps said about that, the better. And I'm delighted to say that Michael Portillo, former Defence Secretary, and of course my GB News presenter colleague, who's here from 11, has dashed to this studio before making his way back to his studio to review the papers with me. Michael, delighted to see you as ever.
Happy Mother's Day to you, Camilla.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, let's kick off with this really interesting story. Now, this is in the Sunday Times. We're calling it our global story of the day because this is the prosecutor who has managed to bring this case, or at least put this case before the ICC about Putin. Tell me more.
Well, the lead prosecutor at the moment is a British barrister, Karim Khan, I think his name is, and he has given a very interesting interview to the Sunday Times. He has travelled extensively to Ukraine. I think he's made 4 visits before deciding on the prosecution that will be made against Vladimir Putin. Interestingly, the subject of the prosecution that they've chosen is the abduction of children. There have been many other reported war crimes, but they've chosen this because it is so well documented and it is clear that this is an official Russian policy. The children, when they've been abducted from Ukraine, are paraded in stadia in Russia, and they therefore think they have the best chance of a conviction on this subject. Many people will say this is all ridiculous because there's no way Vladimir Putin will ever appear in a dock. I would take a dissenting view to that. I would say that I remember from my dealings in politics, when I was Defence Secretary, we had Milosevic and Karadzic and Mladic in the former Yugoslavia. There was a fellow called Charles Taylor in Liberia. All of these people did end up in the dock. All of these people ended up in prison. And I also think that what the International Criminal Court has done in the case of Putin is just a start. There is already another Russian indicted. There will be other names that will be named. And the thing will become increasingly complicated as those people find that there are 123 countries to which they cannot travel for fear of the warrant being served upon them in that country.
I mean, it certainly limits him. We know he's in Mariupol today. He's got this incoming visit from Xi Jinping, I believe, tomorrow. Do you seriously think we could end up with a situation where Putin is in prison, though?
That is hard to see, but because of my experience, I don't entirely 100% rule it out. But I certainly think it will give a lot of pause to people who are about to commit war crimes in the future. Remember, some of this is preventative. There will be people tomorrow who are, I mean, this is a terrible thing to say, but you know, who are deciding how to treat people in Ukraine, whether to murder them or rape them or abduct them. And those people will be given pause because their names will one day appear on an indictment. And they may be held responsible for the crimes that they might commit in the future. So I think there is a real validity here in trying to prevent crime as well as punishing crime that's already occurred.
It's certainly a major development in the tale of the Russian president and his crimes, certainly. Now, unexpected migration row of the day. I mean, we're used to the migration row between Gary Lineker and the right, or Twitter, and it's the people that don't agree with it. But actually, on the Mail on Sunday, there's this really interesting story. Priti Patel threatened to sue Suella over migrants clash. 2 Home Secretaries at war, Michael. Who would have thought it in Tory politics? 2
Home Secretaries of the right. 2 Home Secretaries pursuing an identical policy, or almost identical policy. I suppose it shows that in the Conservative Party, any 2 people can have a row, and even in this case, threaten to go to law. What's it actually about? It's about something that Robert Jenrick, a junior minister, said in Parliament he was trying to blame the predecessor administration, which was, of course, a Conservative administration under a different Prime Minister and different Home Secretary, for the fact that the Manston refugee facility was overcrowded, that not enough hotel spaces had been booked. And it seems that there was at least an insinuation that Priti Patel was in some way responsible for this. She said absolutely that she was not. She rang Simon Case, the beleaguered cabinet secretary, in a fury, saying that she would sue. And I dare say that present government ministers will back down from making that accusation.
Although it is a fair accusation to be asking what previous Home Secretaries did about this issue when you consider the jump in migrant boats from hundreds in 2019 to 45,000 last year.
I think any Home Secretary would... I think any former Home Secretary would say of the present Home Secretary, you know the extent to which I am let down by my officials.
Yes.
You know the way this office functions. If you think that this was my personal responsibility, you probably know that that isn't really the case. I think that's where it lies. Of all people, Suella Braverman ought to understand the constraints and difficulties under which Priti Patel was operating when she was Home Secretary. Yeah,
it probably speaks to the Home Office being a basket case as much as perhaps some of the people that have been in charge of it.
I think it is a basket case, and of course many of the people oppose the policies that the ministers want to develop.
Which is not easy. Now, you mentioned Simon Case there, who appears in a photograph that may or may not prove handy to Boris Johnson when he appears at the Privileges Committee this Wednesday. We've called this manoeuvre of the weekend because Boris is on manoeuvres, isn't he? He's briefed all of the papers that he's got this legal dossier that he thinks is going to wipe this case out of the water.
The thing that most impressed me about this report is that his legal team is led by Lord Panic, KC. A strange name, but this is a man of extraordinary pedigree who's been at the top of his game for the last 30 years, and that is to be taken seriously. The implication in the story is that Boris can now produce evidence that's not been seen before, that he was advised by officials to say that no rules had been broken inside number 10, when there were actually things that may or may not have been parties going on. Now, that would be quite strong evidence because, I mean, any minister who goes to the dispatch box picks up a bit of paper that's been written by officials and relies upon that. And that is perfectly legitimate. And if the bit of paper is not right, then you inadvertently misled Parliament. You didn't do it deliberately. There seems to be a second strand, by the way, which is somewhat to discredit Harriet Harman, who is the chair of the committee, because it appears that Harriet may already have expressed her opinion that Boris is guilty. And it's not normal for a trial judge to express the verdict before the evidence has been taken.
That's not ideal. I mean, there's been people who have supported Boris in the week talking about it being McCarthyite. There's also been talk of the fact that some of the panellists have expressed these negative sentiments towards the former Prime Minister. I mean, with all of your political experience and knowledge, does it sort of smell of a bit of a stitch-up or not?
Well, I would say that perhaps the House of Commons is on trial as well as Boris Johnson, because, I mean, you know, if people's careers are going to be put on the line, you need to be reassured that the process is a fair one. Yeah. And if people who are put in this very special position, a quasi-judicial position, are expressing their views off the record, then I think that is pretty serious. So I do think shares in Boris are up a bit today.
I agree with you. And we'll grab the popcorn for Wednesday's appearance, which seems to be box office. Talking of box office, Taylor Swift. I know you wanted to do this story. You're a Taylor Swift fan. What are we called? Because I'm a Taylor Swift fan. Swifties. We're Swifties. And you're saying that she has got this unique ability to unite people in America where no other politician can, seemingly.
53% of Americans, I mean, how many hundreds of millions of people is that, express themselves as being Taylor Swift fans? Only 28% of Americans say they're Republicans and 28% say they're Democrats. 53% are Swifties. This is extraordinary. There's a lot of publicity at the moment. She's beginning a 52-venue tour. There's 11 changes of costume. There are 44 songs. It lasts more than 3.5 hours. While I was wasting my time during lockdown, she recorded 2 new albums, Folklore and Evermore.
I love Folklore.
She also re-recorded a lot of our old material to regain the copyright, which she had lost. As a Tory, these are the values that I welcome.
So you're saying Swift is a poster girl for Toryism, Michael?
She kind of is. I mean, the work ethic is absolutely apparent in this woman. Extraordinary.
But maybe we're also saying Swift for president. I mean, if she garners that much support from left and right in America, the sky's the limit.
I hope she doesn't go much further in expressing her political views. They are, of course, as you would expect, liberal, left of centre. I hope she doesn't make a bid for politics, and I hope her political views don't prejudice her success. But right now she's got 53% support.
You could say that her talents might be wasted on the political scene.
Exactly.
Michael, thank you very much. Really looking forward to seeing your show at 11. I know you've got the mad dash back to that other studio.